Ever had one of those days where things just keep piling up? You forget an assignment, you put off a chore, and before you know it, you are completely buried and need a serious rescue. The ancient Israelites knew that feeling well. They had a recurring habit of making poor choices and ignoring good advice until they were eventually boxed in by their enemies. But every single time they realized they were in over their heads and asked for help, God listened. He never ignored them. Instead, he sent someone to step in and save the day. This diagram shows a clear cycle in their history. The people would make a mistake, find themselves trapped, call out for help, and God would send what the Bible calls a deliverer to break them out. If you were picturing a warrior in shining armor with a glowing sword, think again. These rescuers were usually everyday, ordinary people who solved problems in highly unusual ways. God's rescue missions rarely look like a typical action movie. Usually, he chooses people and strategies that seem completely backwards to get the job done. In ancient Israel, the people looked to a woman named Deborah for guidance. She didn't carry a spear or wear armor. She sat under a palm tree and helped the people understand how God wanted them to live. When her people faced a terrifying enemy army, Deborah relied on a specific kind of strength. She had an absolute, fearless faith that God would protect them, no matter how scary things looked. That bravery has a way of spreading. Her confidence in God inspired an entire army of terrified people to stand up and defend themselves. Rescuing someone does not require you to be the strongest person in the room. You can be a deliverer simply by helping the people around you find their own faith. Then there was Gideon. He found himself staring down a massive enemy camp, feeling completely outnumbered and outmatched. God then gave Gideon a very surprising instruction. God told him his army was actually too big, and he needed to send almost all of his soldiers back home. Gideon was left with a tiny group of men. Instead of swords and shields, they were told to carry trumpets, empty clay pitchers, and lamps. In the middle of the night, they surrounded the enemy camp. On Gideon's signal, they smashed the pitchers and blew their trumpets. The sudden noise and the bursting light caused so much confusion that the massive enemy army panicked and ran away. God does not need a huge, powerful force to save us. If we are willing to follow his plan, he can accomplish massive miracles using the smallest, most unlikely tools. And then we have Samson, a man famous for being the strongest person around, capable of unbelievably impressive physical feats. This scale shows where that power actually lived. It wasn't in his biceps. Samson's strength was fueled by a deep personal commitment he had with God. It was a two-way street. As long as Samson honored his word, God provided the power. But when Samson made bad choices and stopped honoring that commitment, his super strength completely vanished. It was only at the very end of his life, when he finally remembered God and asked for help one last time, that his strength returned. True power does not come from how physically strong or clever we are on our own. It comes from faithfully keeping our promises to God. Deborah, Gideon, and Samson all lived in different times and faced different problems, yet they all show that God uses surprising, faithful ways to rescue his people when they can't save themselves. These stories show a pattern. Whenever the situation seemed hopeless, God provided a specific person to lead the way out. Each of these smaller rescues was actually setting the stage for one final, perfect deliverer. And that ultimate deliverer is Jesus Christ. Today, our lives look a lot like those ancient Israelites. We make mistakes, we make bad choices, and we often find ourselves stuck in a loop that feels impossible to escape. We desperately need a rescue today, too. The good news is that Jesus is always waiting for us to ask for help. No matter how trapped we feel, he is always willing to welcome us back and let us try again. So whenever you feel completely stuck, remember that you do not need a massive army to break out. You just need to keep your promises, ask for help, and trust Jesus to be your deliverer.